Is his cold any better?
I don't know. At night, it's hard to tell if he's coughing or snoring or being romantic.
In 1991, your TV was basically furniture. It had a real back to it. The remote control was either missing, broken, or being used as a blunt object. And if you wanted to know what was trending, you turned on the news, or you listened to your friend Kyle explain it at the mall food court like he worked for CNN. Which is exactly why network television in 1991 felt like a high-stakes carnival game. The big three were still fighting for the same audience. Cable was creeping in like a quiet threat, and every exec was convinced the next hit was one fresh concept away. So they threw everything at the schedule. Celebrity sitcoms, movie knockoffs, moody revivals, glossy crime shows, heartwarming family comedies, then yanked them away at the first sign of trouble. And here's the thing, a lot of these shows didn't even fail because they were unwatchable. Some had legit stars, some had famous creators, some had prime launch pads that should have been a golden ticket. But 1991 didn't care. If the time slot was wrong, the marketing was weird. The premise was too pitch meeting, or the world outside your living room got louder than the laugh track. It was over. So today, we're counting down the biggest TV flops of 1991, the shows that showed up confident, got humbled immediately, and vanished so fast you'd swear they were a fever dream, until you find a blurry promo photo online and whisper, "Oh my gosh, this was real." Let's start the countdown. 10. Sunday Dinner, CBS. You know a show is living dangerously when its entire concept is, what if family dinner, but on TV? Because on paper, Sunday Dinner sounds like a safe bet. A weekly gathering, clashing personalities, generational bickering, emotional moments, a little laughter, a little heart. It's basically a sitcom crockpot recipe. And that's exactly why it's such a classic 1991 flop. It's the kind of show a network orders because it feels responsible, like the TV equivalent of buying sensible shoes. But sensible doesn't get you viewers when the competition is loud, flashy, and already familiar. The problem wasn't that the dinner table setup couldn't work. It's that the show didn't give people a reason to care quickly enough. Sitcoms live and die by characters you instantly recognize. Someone you love, someone you hate, someone you want to argue with. Sunday Dinner felt like it expected you to commit emotionally before it earned your attention. And network audiences in 1991 were not showing up ready to build a relationship with a show. They were channel surfing like it was an Olympic event. So the series fizzled out fast, and it became one of those titles you only remember when you stumble across it and think, wait, that was a thing? Which is honestly the most brutal kind of flop. Not a scandal, not a disaster, just a quiet, polite disappearance. Next up, another family show that didn't even make it far enough to become a family. 9. Sibs, ABC. In 1991, ABC looked at Wednesday night and said, what if we made it feel like a comedy assembly line? If you survived that era, you know the vibe. Big lead-ins, bigger expectations, and a network that acted like it could simply schedule a hit into existence. Enter Sibs, a sister-focused sitcom built around 3 adults who love each other, but also stress each other out like it's a part-time job. It had a solid premise: the responsible older sister trying to keep her life together, while her younger sisters bring chaos, neediness, and I made a decision, please help me immediately energy. The cast was legit, the tone was meant to be grown up, and ABC even tried to position it inside their hyped up Wednesday comedy push. But here's the brutal part. Sibs got the kind of rollout that sounds impressive on paper. Preview airing, a powerful lineup around it, and still couldn't hold the audience. The ratings came in soft. ABC hit the brakes, and the show got yanked into that dreaded zone where viewers assume it's already canceled, which becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's the purest kind of early 90s flop. Not one explosive disaster, just a show that never got a weekly habit going before the network lost patience. And speaking of patience, next up is a series with huge names that still couldn't buy itself time. Number 8. Good Sports, CBS. Good Sports is proof that star power isn't a guarantee. It's just a louder way to fail. The pitch is obvious. Put big names in a sitcom, wrap it in a sports TV setting, and let personality do the heavy lifting. It's built for chemistry, banter, and that behind the scenes feel that networks love because it seems fresh without being risky. The problem is, sitcom audiences don't tune in for names. They tune in for a reason to come back next week. And Good Sports struggled to find that reason. If the premise is basically people work together and quip, the writing has to be sharp enough to make the workplace feel like a world. The characters need clear lanes. The humor needs a voice. Without that, it becomes a show you watch once, shrug at politely, and then forget exists until someone mentions it decades later like it's a lost cassette tape. Also, the early 90s had a very specific sitcom palette. Viewers liked warm, familiar setups, but they still wanted the jokes to hit fast. If a show takes too long to find its rhythm, the audience doesn't patiently wait for it to get good. They just go watch something that already is. So, Good Sports ended up becoming one of those "how did this not work?" footnotes. Not because the ingredients were bad, but because the recipe never came together. It's like ordering a burger with premium toppings and getting a bun and vibes. And now, for a flop with an even bigger advantage, a concept audiences already proved they liked. 7. Baby Talk, ABC. If you ever want to understand why TV history is littered with flops, look no further than Baby Talk. A show that exists because someone said, "People love that movie where the baby talks. So, what if we made it a weekly sitcom?" That's the whole logic. That's the pitch. That's the trap. Because a movie gimmick is like a party trick. Fun once, maybe twice. But eventually you're staring at it thinking, okay, but what else do you do? Baby Talk tried to stretch that single idea into an ongoing series, and the result was exactly what you'd expect. The novelty wears off. The jokes start repeating. The tone gets wobbly. Half family sitcom, half wink at the camera concept comedy. And when a show doesn't know what it is, the audience doesn't either. Behind the scenes, this kind of project often becomes a frantic scramble. Retooling, casting shifts, tweaking the voice, trying to recalibrate the comedy like you're turning the antenna to catch a signal. But you can't retool your way out of a concept that's fundamentally thin. And that's what makes Baby Talk a perfect 1991 flop. It has that executives chasing yesterday's success feeling. It's TV trying to photocopy a hit and getting a blurry page with missing ink. You can almost picture the promo. Upbeat music, cute baby, big smile. You won't believe what he says next. And then you watch the show and realize, yes, you will. You will believe it. You've seen it already. Next, a show that should have been reliable, because it came from a guy who cranked out dependable TV like it was a factory. 6. Palace Guard, CBS. Some shows flop loudly. Palace Guard flopped like a magician who walks on stage, trips over his cape, and immediately gets escorted out before anyone sees a trick. This one had a slick, professional concept. A reformed thief turns into a high-end security guy at a fancy hotel. On paper, it's perfect for episodic storytelling. Every week, there's a new situation, a new guest, a new scheme, and your lead character uses his shady past for good. It's a built-in engine. So why did it vanish so fast? Because built-in engine doesn't matter if the audience never gets in the car. This kind of show lives or dies by tone. Is it a light crime dramedy? A serious action procedural? A witty caper? If it leans too serious, it feels stiff. If it leans too cute, it feels weightless. And if the network doesn't market the tone clearly, viewers don't know what they're signing up for. That uncertainty kills momentum. Then, there's the brutal reality of network patience. If a show doesn't pop early, the schedule turns into a blender. Episodes get moved, swapped, delayed, quietly burned off. Viewers miss 1 week and assume it was canceled, which often becomes true because everyone assumes it's canceled. Palace Guard became one of those "I swear I remember this" shows, a title you half recall, like it aired between commercials for phone cards and detergent. It didn't become a cult classic. It didn't become a scandal. It became a shrug. And coming up next, a show with one of the most aggressively early 90s titles ever, like it was created by a pager. 5. P.S. I Love You, CBS. The title alone tells you everything about the era. P.S. I Love You sounds like a note folded into a triangle and passed in class, and also like a hotline you'd call from a payphone while trying not to get caught by the manager of the mall. But the premise was actually pretty ambitious. A cop and a con woman thrown together under a witness protection style situation, posing as a couple while working cases. That's a whole stack of tones right there. Romance, comedy, crime, danger, will they, won't they, plus a weekly procedural structure. And in theory, that blend could have worked. In practice, it's exactly the kind of mix that can come out feeling confused. If the romance is too light, the crime stakes feel fake. If the crime is too heavy, the playful couple premise feels silly. And if neither side fully commits, you end up with a show that feels like it's constantly adjusting its tie in the mirror. Also, viewers don't love learning rules. If a show's setup requires a paragraph to explain who they are, why they're together, what the cover story is, what the weekly format is, you've already lost a chunk of casual channel surfers. Sitcoms and dramas that hit big usually have a premise you can grasp in one sentence. So, P.S. I Love You became another short-lived CBS experiment, a show that was trying to be clever, stylish, and romantic, but never landed hard enough to become essential. Next up, a flop that's extra painful because it had the kind of launchpad networks dream about, and still couldn't make it stick. 4. Davis Rules, ABC. Imagine getting handed the best possible head start and somehow still tripping over your own shoelaces. That's the legend of Davis Rules. This wasn't some tiny throwaway show tossed into a dead slot with no promotion. This was positioned like it mattered. It had the kind of setup network TV loves: widowed dad, 3 kids, heart, humor, and a built-in emotional core that can spin stories for years. The show had all the ingredients for that family-friendly anchor sitcom role. So what happened? Sometimes a show doesn't fail because it's awful. It fails because it never becomes distinct. In a crowded TV landscape, nice and well-meaning are not enough. If the characters don't pop immediately, if the jokes don't have a specific voice, if the show doesn't feel like something you describe to a friend with excitement, it gets drowned out by louder neighbors. And when a network senses hesitation, it starts making moves that often make things worse. Shifting time slots, tweaking tone, swapping pieces, trying to fix it in public. To viewers, that doesn't look like improvement. It looks like instability. They don't invest in something that seems like it might vanish. So Davis Rules became one of those almost stories. Not a total disaster, but a show that never found a clear lane and kept getting nudged around until its potential didn't matter anymore. Now we're heading into the flops with bigger outside forces, because in 1991, sometimes the schedule wasn't the biggest obstacle. Sometimes the world itself interrupted. 3. Dark Shadows, NBC. When you revive a cult classic, you're making a deal with the universe. You get a built-in fan base, but you also get absolutely no forgiveness. NBC's 1991 Dark Shadows revival brought gothic soap drama to prime time. Moody atmosphere, romance, mystery. The kind of show that feels like it should be watched with the lights low and a dramatic sigh ready at all times. It had that glossy, This is serious TV vibe that networks love when they want to look sophisticated. And then reality arrived. 1991 was a year where news coverage could bulldoze entertainment schedules. Viewers were paying attention to major world events, and networks were constantly preempting or shifting programming. For a serialized show, especially one that relies on mood, continuity, and weekly habit, that kind of disruption is deadly. If audiences miss an episode, they feel behind. If they feel behind, they stop watching. If they stop watching, the ratings drop. And once the ratings drop, the network starts sharpening the axe. That's why this flop stings. It wasn't just people didn't like it. It was a collision between a show that needed consistency and a moment in history that didn't offer any. And because it was a cult-style show, the fans who did watch tended to love it loudly, which only makes the cancellation feel harsher. It's the kind of series people remember fondly, not because it ran forever, but because it felt like something special that got cut short. Next, a sitcom flop for completely different reasons. One with a legacy shaped by tragedy, and a "what do you even do?" question nobody wants to answer. 2. The Royal Family, CBS. Some shows flop because they're messy. Some flop because they're bland. The Royal Family flopped in the most heartbreaking way. It got hit by real life. This sitcom arrived with huge expectations. It had heavyweight comedic presence, the kind of casting that tells you the network saw it as a centerpiece, not a filler. The premise was designed for warmth and humor, the kind of show that could have lived comfortably in a lineup for years if everything went normally. But everything didn't go normally. The production was rocked by tragedy when a central star passed away during the making of the series. That is not the kind of hurdle a show can right around without fundamentally changing what it is. A sitcom isn't just scripts, it's chemistry, rhythm, relationships. When a show loses the person the whole dynamic was built around, it becomes a different show overnight. Networks and producers sometimes try to continue in those situations, partly out of respect, partly out of momentum, partly because there are contracts and schedules and a whole machine already moving. But audiences feel the shift. The tone changes. The energy changes. Viewers can sense that the show is carrying a weight it never intended to carry. So the Royal Family became a series defined less by what it was supposed to be and more by the impossible position it was placed in, trying to function as entertainment while everyone involved was processing something far bigger than television. That's why it lands at number 2. Not because it's fun to dunk on, because it's a reminder that sometimes TV flops aren't just business failures. Sometimes they're human stories with a sad ending. And now, the flop that perfectly captures the cold, mechanical side of network TV, when a show gets moved, shuffled, and quietly tossed aside like it was never meant to matter. 1. The Family Man, CBS. If you want the purest example of a 1991 network flop, the kind that feels less like a failure and more like a slow, unglamorous sinking, meet The Family Man. This was a heartfelt family sitcom built around a widowed father trying to raise his kids while holding down a demanding job. It's a timeless premise. It's the kind of setup that should be stable. Lots of built-in stories, lots of relatable conflict, plenty of room for humor and heart. But here's what kills shows like this. They're easy for networks to treat like interchangeable parts. When a sitcom doesn't explode out of the gate, it becomes movable. It gets shifted around the schedule. It ends up in awkward slots. It gets promoted less. Viewers miss it once and assume it's gone. The audience erodes, not necessarily because they hated it, but because the habit never forms. And without habit, a show is dead. What makes The Family Man the biggest flop of this batch is how perfectly it illustrates that brutal, quiet process. It didn't have a scandal. It didn't have some legendary behind-the-scenes meltdown. It simply got swallowed by the machine. A decent concept that never became a priority. never became distinct enough to fight for attention, and never got the stable runway it needed to build an audience. And that's the saddest kind of TV death. Not the dramatic cancellation with headlines, the soft cancellation. The one where the show fades out while the network shrugs and moves on to the next pitch meeting. Which brings us to the real question. What did all these flops have in common? Conclusion. Looking back, the funniest part about 1991's flops is that they weren't all bad. Some were perfectly watchable. Some had real talent behind them. Some had premises that would probably get a second life today as a streaming dramedy with a moodier color palette and a prestige-sounding soundtrack. But network TV in 1991 didn't operate on patience. It operated on momentum. A show needed a clear identity fast. It needed a time slot that made sense. It needed consistent airing, so viewers could form a weekly habit. And it needed to feel different enough that you'd actually tell someone about it the next day, because word of mouth was the algorithm back then. When those things didn't happen, the networks reacted the only way they knew how. They panicked. They moved shows around, retooled them, promoted them weirdly, and sometimes quietly buried them like they were embarrassed. And once that cycle started, it was almost impossible to reverse. That's why 1991 is such a goldmine for flops. It's the year where you can literally watch the networks trying to guess the future in real time, sometimes getting it right, and sometimes throwing a perfectly decent show into a wood chipper because it didn't pop immediately. Now I want to hear from you. Which of these did you actually remember? And be honest, did you ever watch one of these for 3 weeks and then just lose it? Like it fell into a scheduling black hole? Drop your pick in the comments. And if you've got a forgotten 1991 flop I didn't mention, tell me, because odds are I'll remember it the second you say the title, and then immediately wonder if it was a dream.